everyone, welcome to Pickleball and Beyond. My name's Ryan.
My name is Vino.
And today we are taking a look at the 6-0 Ruby, and we're gonna find out, is it better than the double black diamond? So Vino, lots of hype obviously going into this paddle. Let's hear your thoughts on it.
I mean, it's a premium paddle, premiumly priced. Lots of people were expecting it. Very first time that you have full Kevlar surface, so big difference. And like overall, they've lived up to their standards.
Yeah,
right?
well constructed.
Well constructed, good, solid, lovely design. I love the red on it.
Yeah, comes with a super nice grip on it.
Very nice grip. Well, like even the grip is shaped well. Let's put it
really nice.
Because like we have tried a lot of paddles where the grip shape's off. This is spot on.
And if you add the overgrip, it still feels great.
It feels great. Overall, really like it. I mean, it's a lovely premium paddle.
Yep.
What are your thoughts as far as like first impressions go?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on all levels of that. And the biggest thing that is really stands out on this paddle is that Kevlar aspect to it. So the first thing I want to jump in on would be, where do we think this paddle belongs in terms of control, power? Is it an all-around paddle? And I think we ultimately decided it just smidges into the power category.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, for the main reason being, we'll get more into the control later, but it seemed like with that Kevlar surface, it didn't really quite dwell on there, and it made the control just a little bit harder than some other paddles, and it has a lot of pop to it, so it seemed to just slide just into that power category for us.
I totally agree. So let's go start talking straight on the kitchen. How do you like it? How did the control feel? And then we'll progress into the power side.
Yeah, so from the kitchen, if there was lots of really slow dinks coming back at you, it did have a nice control, nice touch on it, which you'd expect, right?
Yep.
I mean, one of the most talked about paddles of 2023. Or if somebody were to apply spin to you, you can fight that spin off. Very nice surface out of the box, right?
Yes.
No issues there. So I felt like I could place dinks pretty well, but there was still that slight lack of dwell that I enjoy to get a little more backspin on the ball, specifically on dinks, but it still felt very nice.
Let's talk about like when you're talking about dinks and placing, and again, we are now holding this paddle to a very high standard.
We are
right?
holding it to a very high standard.
Let's put it out there. Like we do testing different paddles and stuff like this. This definitely is on the higher end of like paddles that we're testing. Let's talk a little bit on the sweet spot. Is it forgiving on the sides like other paddles that we have seen that had a large sweet spot? Because I think that really plays an important part when you're placing your dinks, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, personally, it seemed like it had a pretty solid sweet spot. I think that goes into, it's obviously a well-made paddle, and it seemed like it was relatively forgiving on some deviations.
Yes.
I can't think of any paddles off the top of my head that are like the largest sweet spot, but I'd say it did have a pretty good sweet spot.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that?
I agree, and like you're going to have a lot of questions that compare with the double black diamond, and we're going to do a video just comparing those two. I expected the sweet spot to be bigger than, but it was relatively similar or even a notch less for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say just a hair less than the double black.
Yes. So if you're expecting a larger, and one thing that you had to note is this comes already very heavy, right? Off the most of the paddles around the 8.3, 8.4. I think this weighs around 8.2. So you're not going to be able to put too much of lead to weight it. So that is something I think we need to put it out there. So let's transition back into the power, which I think it has good amount of power.
Yep, so with the power, we're going to talk about in terms of pop on it and also like full raw power ground stroke.
Yeah. So and let's define that a little bit, because lots of people are talking about, when you talk about power, the generating power and the pop power. When we talk about generating power is when you hit this, how easily can you generate power from it? The pop part is when a ball comes onto it, how much does it return forward? So it's popping straight without having to this thing. So let's go with generating power. What are your thoughts?
As far as with generating power, I think we ranked it into that power paddle category. it does do a pretty good job at generating the power.
Yes.
But to compare it to the double black diamond, I've read both answers where people say the ruby hits harder. No, the double black hits harder. And you never know if it depends on our double black diamond was a little bit used. The ruby was brand new. But we found that the double black, without a doubt, was hitting harder.
Yes.
From a full, if you're doing a smash, if you're doing a drive from the baseline, in that terms of power, without a doubt, our double black diamond was hitting.
Definitely, yes.
Granted, this had a good amount of power. Like I personally play with the ace spade, and this was definitely like 2 notches higher. It has a lot of it. And again, going back to that dwell, there's not a lot of dwell on this. It comes off very hot, and that ties into going into what you were asking before, the pop on this paddle.
Yes.
And as you could probably guess, how I talked about this Kevlar surface, it doesn't sit on here. If somebody drives the ball at you, you really got to be careful on your angles.
Yes, it flies off.
It flies off. And on the flip side of that is, I think if you could get some pretty nasty speed ups with this paddle as well.
Yeah, but again, just touching on this, I think that had a little bit less pop, and I really enjoyed that on there because it weighted less. You were able to take and angle it a little bit better. You were able to, for me, you were able to maneuver that just a smidge more than the ruby.
Okay. And that could go down to a preference if you want that little extra pop or not. And again, I've read some people claim that they're getting more pop on their double black diamond, but both of us agreed that we were certainly getting more pop on the ruby.
Let's go to spin.
And
I think we did mention this at the start. When I opened this up, and this is a brand new paddle.
Brand new ruby.
I touched the surface. It felt like a very high grit sandpaper.
Yeah, you
I kid you not. And we have played with paddles that have texture like no man's business. But this, the way it felt, it still feels very gritty.
Yes.
Right? That being said, we haven't played a lot with this. We're already feeling some points of wear. So that is something that, and we did take some pictures. We put some pictures and actually found some like bald spots as well. So
Granted, we used the paddle for like an hour, 2 hours.
And already felt that.
Yeah, if you're already having it wear off, it's not carbon fiber. You can't clean it. And it's unfortunate, you're paying for a premium amount for a premium paddle, but you can't restore it.
And how it's going to last as time wears? That's a question for time itself.
And lots of people that I've read have had that same issue where, it came off over time versus comparing it again to the double black diamond, that you can clean and it's going to last you a lot longer.
Let's go to spin.
Yeah, going into the spin now. So we had a very high expectation.
Exactly.
I mean, if you can listen to that, right?
Yes.
And you're like, this thing is going to just absolutely rip. And we know it got a fair amount of spin. And I think it was just from that lack of dwell or something that it just didn't get as much as our double black diamond. I know on Sig Zero's website, they claim the ruby got more revolutions, and I read other people's stats that agreed with us saying the double black diamond got more. And that's what we both ended up noticing.
And I think with the hype that came around it, there's a high expectation about the amount of spin that they should get. It gets high amount of spin.
It's in the high tier.
Yes, it's definitely the high tier. But I don't know, I felt, again, we used actually an older double black, right? And I felt I got more spin from
Without
that.
a doubt.
On slow and fast.
Yeah, both when you're doing drives,
as well as
the top spin was ridiculous there. And then as far as softer, trying to hit third shot drops with backspin, or if you're hitting at the kitchen line with backspin, I really think it goes down to that dwell for why the soft ones were better on here. But it showed even the fast ones, even with this crazy gray surface. I mean, this was like absolute A tier spin on the double black diamond, just out of my mind. The ruby was like an A minus B plus tier spin.
I think I would agree with you.
Did a phenomenal job, but I was expecting so much more out of it. And it was just a bummer that that surface is gonna wear off. And it's unfortunate.
And we are going to not know how it's going to be, and hopefully down the road we can do a paddle review after 6 months. What was the wear on that, right? Adaptability, and this is something I think this is more for someone coming from a little bit more on a higher playing level. I really would say,
it takes a little to control it.
Yes, it takes a little bit of getting used to it. It's a paddle of its own, which you need to learn onto it. Get what I mean? So it takes a little bit more adaptability from an adaptability standpoint. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree entirely. Out of the box, I think it feels pretty well balanced. I mean, for the weight, I've had paddles that are like 8.5s, and I'm like, this feels so much lighter.
Yes.
Where, you know, this feels like true to its weight.
Yes.
It's pretty well balanced, but to me, the type of player this would be great for is, like I said, I think if you play pretty aggressive, this still has a good amount of control to it, I will say. Pretty well balanced, and like I said, I think the speed ups on this paddle can really catch people off guard. I know another one of my favorite paddles for that was like the J1H, where that thing it can fly off, and that also has a lot of control. But if you don't like the cutout or prefer the shape of the Ruby, it's obviously an awesome paddle. I mean, there's a million reviews on it. So many have sold, and you know, obviously it's for a good reason. So it is a great paddle. At the end of the day, it does boil down to preference, and we're one of many people giving our opinion on this paddle.
And I think the reason we love doing what we are doing is, at the end of the day, you're going to like a paddle for your preference. So, you know, it's best you go try the paddle, see how you like it, how it feels on you, and I think that's the best way to choose.
And there's definitely a lot of players who this will fit their game.
Definitely. So yeah, we enjoyed playing with it. If anyone wants to demo it, please reach out to us. We loved helping people find paddles. That's our passion. Please subscribe, comment. We love hearing from you, and hope to see you in another paddle review.